では始めてまいります。Let's go back and let's begin the next session. So this session will be about impact transparency dilemma, balancing disclosure and communication in the age of accountability. The moderator, let me introduce the three moderators and the speakers coming in as they come on stage. Thank you very much. The moderator will be Mr. David Freiberg. David leads impact investing and accounting at EY, helping companies implement impact strategies, and also a founding member of Harvard's Impact Weight Accounting Initiative and has developed ESG and impact services. Thank you very much. And the speaker will be Sonja Haut. Sonja heads impact assessment at Novartis and authorized the case of impact. She co-chairs the International Foundation for Valuing Impact, IFVI, and is active in global organizations like the World Economic Forum. And the speaker will be Ryohei Yanagi-san. And Ryohei, a visiting professor at Waseda University, researches ESG and financial strategy. He developed the Yanagi model integrating ESG and IR and has advised the Tokyo Stock Exchange and served as CFO of ASI 5 times. ありがとうございます。どうぞよろしくお願いいたします。さあ、それでは皆さんもう一度大きな拍手でお迎えください。Please give a round of applause. So, では、Mr. David, can I have the mic for you? Or 柳さんが回してください。The moderator ですよね。So, okay, so please take it away, David. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, and thank you everyone for joining today. And thank you, Yanagi-san and Sonja, for flying in all the way from Switzerland just for a day. Really appreciate you making the trip to see us, and hopefully you'll get to see a little bit of Japan in the short time you're here. Again, everyone, thank you so much for joining, and thank you for coming to this session. Impact transparency is such it's almost becoming a buzzword at the moment, but what does that really mean? How do we think about this in the context of emerging disclosure requirements in Europe and really across the world? What is really the goal here? And how do we think about creating impact disclosures, impact strategies that are value creating, but also taking into consideration very real challenges around impact washing and very real concerns? So a lot of things for us to touch on, and so let's jump right into it. Sonja and Yanagi-san, I think one of the first questions that I think that I have when I think about this topic is, what's really the problem at the end of the day? Companies are already disclosing a lot of information and are already going to be disclosing more information under CSRD, SFDR regulations, et cetera. So what really is the problem when we think about impact transparency? And maybe Sonja, I'll pass it to you to start this.
Yeah, thank you, David. Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be here and a great honor to be here on stage together with Ryu-san and you, David. What's the problem? Well, I guess I'd like to circle back and remind ourselves that disclosures are about three primary things. One is certainly to inform interested stakeholders. The next one is to create a positive reputation for a company. And 3 is to be compliant with whatever the disclosure requirements are. And now, with these regulatory requirements, certainly in the EU, predominantly, this topic of compliance is starting to take over, in that one gets the sense, many leaders have the sense, that this sort of answers everything, and we have less of a focus anymore on the topic of wanting to inform adequately about what the company is about. So let me pause here and pass it on to Ryo for his comments on what the problem is.
Okay, thank you, David and Sonia. It's my great honor to be here with you. Hi, everyone. I'm Yanagi, and visiting professor at Waseda University, and also ex-CFO of the Eisai Pharmaceutical Company. In my, personal observation, what's happening right now is transition from ESG impact booming to chaotic impact and ESG disclosure type of stuff. We are in the process of confusion, desperation, a lot of things. A lot of the Japanese companies, especially sustainability department, are complaining to me that the too much requirement, CSRD, ISSB, FSA, disclosure for disclosure should be substance over form. But in reality, what's happening right now is form over substance. People are losing sight of the strategy, value creation, business model. So we need a certain, framework, guideline to streamline and alignment of, ESG impact with real strategy and corporate value. So we are facing critical juncture at this stage, especially in Japan. Unless otherwise, it's fake ESG, fake impact. Nothing gonna happen. Nothing gonna change in Japan. We got to liaise impact ESG with strategy and corporate value under certain framework, guideline, alignment. That's what I think. Thank you.
I love this idea of, or I guess I don't really like it, but it's really well put, this idea of form over substance, and whether I think we would like to admit it or not, at the end of the day, that's how we fundamentally think about disclosures at the end of the day, whether or not they are sustainability disclosures or any of the other myriad of disclosures that companies are required to do, or even in many cases not formally required to do, but have very real pressures from investors and other stakeholders. And I think that in itself, leads to a question around if we are going to re-envision this idea of transitioning from a compliance mindset to a value creation mindset. What information does different actors want when we think about impact? What information do markets want? What information do impact investors want? What information do we want internally as corporate managers who are trying to build a better, more resilient business? How should we think about that kind of dichotomy? And maybe, Ryo, I'll pass it over to you to start.
Okay, in my particular career, I've been conducting a global investor survey since 2007 to 22, 15 years with 100 to 200 answers from global investors. Recently, I asked global investors, what do you think about Japan's ESG or impact? Almost 80% of the investors say Japan should show the value relevance between ESG impact and corporate value. And also, I asked, are you going to factor impact or ESG into the valuation? And the vast majority say they will factor 100% or more than half of the impact or ESG into their investment decision or valuation, namely PBR, price to book value ratio. I see some silver lining here. If we can prove relationship between impact and the corporate value, Japanese companies' valuation will be further, enhanced with that. Then key to success, in my view, is threefold. Number one, we had to show some value relevance model or flow chart or impact path. How impact is going to lead to the strategy or corporate value based upon purpose and materiality. So we got to show the flow chart, impact path, number one. Number two, we got to show correlation between impact or ESG with corporate value. To that end, I've been advocating so-called the Yanagi model with multiple regression model showing the positive correlation coefficient between impact or impact with corporate value represented by price to book value ratio. Third alternative is impact accounting. We may elaborate on further at a later stage, but impact accounting is the one tool to show the dollar amount of the social impact company is going to create. With numbers, we can have the value relevance. So with these three countermeasures, I think we should relate impact or ESG with strategy, corporate value, or business model based upon purpose and materiality. That's what I think. Thank you.
Thank you, Ryo. You touched on this idea of the relationship between impact and materiality. And this is an interesting point because it's one of the, I think, the key uncertainties, questions, areas of ambiguity when we look at European regulations, particularly CSRD. How should we be thinking about this idea of impact and materiality in the context of a definition or lack thereof definition with regards to materiality and how we define materiality for regulations, which at the end of the day do define how we need to disclose. Sonja, as the European representative on the panel, maybe you could talk a little bit about how we should think about how this aligns with CSRD.
I feel like I have to stress that Switzerland's not part of the EU. But anyway, we're exposed to that in the same way as you are, as you do business with the EU countries. So on double materiality, the value to society side of things, the current way of doing things is certainly to survey the stakeholders internally and externally and get feedback on what matters to future success and what stakeholders want more of or less of, and therefore where risk hotspots might be and also sources of value. Now, if you do have an impact assessment available, you can overlay this with the results of this survey-based approach to materiality to do some certain quantified sense-making. Now, in my opinion, that can only be a stepping stone, because anything survey-based is inevitably just subjective and therefore not really reliable. I mean, you can, of course, survey even more people to have a greater coverage and a more solidity on your subjectivity, but it remains subjective. What I love to see in the world is an impact assessment that is the basis for materiality assessments, where one just calculates all the social, environmental, and economic impacts a company has, and there's some 20 odd indicators described by the IFVI VBA methodology. If you do this across the board, you have a fairly good understanding on where the material topics are, and then that basis of data can guide you to a notion of what's material. Now, admittedly, that's future talk, but is very much compatible with Ryo's ask for a strategic view on all these data points that otherwise, in and by themselves, just remain a compliance task, and a rather expensive compliance task at this. So we need to find ways of leveraging those compliance elements to actually have this collected data flow into impact statements, into impact assessments, so that there's a greater value add of that exercise that anyway has to happen. Else it's just a very expensive tick boxing exercise at that.
You guys have both spoken a little bit about this idea of measurement at the heart of whether or not of aligning with purpose, building a strategy, providing justifiable, verifiable information. You've also talked about this idea of impact accounting a couple times. Maybe we can pause and have a definition for that. And maybe, Sonja, I'll ask you to do that as the, given that you are the part of the IFVI's value, I forget the name of the panel, I can't remember acronyms, so it's given that you are working closely with them, I'll ask you to maybe give a little bit of an explanation of what is impact accounting.
Sure. I will take a personal approach to that and say that impact accounting is the sustainability equivalent to financial accounting. And with that, I spare you the definition of impact as a way of measuring well-being, changes to individuals and the environment, which very soon gets just very technical. But I guess with the ambition of impact accounting to really have a rule book for what makes a difference to all stakeholders, we have the basis to have a truly meaningful counterbalance instead of randomly selected indicators. And we need to know what does make a difference. I mean, if you look at the World Economic Forum risk report, the number of globally relevant risks that will affect all our businesses is enormously prevailing, and just the number of environmentally related and socially related themes like unrest, more migration, cyber insecurity, inflation, all of things that sort of will mutually reinforce things and don't get easier with climate change and rising sea levels. So these are things where inevitably we need to adapt our metrics, and the currently prevailing metrics of just measuring what flows in and what comes out is just not good enough. We need to be clear on what makes a difference to the world, and that is measuring impact.
So we have one methodology, one approach for measuring, or I should say valuing impact that really looks at this idea of monetizing impact. Can we understand how much of an impact this issue is having on both the business but also society and the environment? And that's, I think, one way of looking at impact. Yanagi-san, you brought up a concept earlier called the Yanagi model. How does that relate to impact accounting and also this broad concept of impact measurement?
Oh, thank you for saying that. And David and Sonja already mentioned the impact accounting, perfectly well said. By the way, in my definition, impact accounting is Mr. David Freiberg himself. He's one of the founding members of the impact-related accounts initiative at the Harvard Business School. He's one of the originators of the impact accounting, and we adopted that. Then, Sonja, concretely defined the impact accounting, well said, I think. Then beyond that, I'm going to tell you the certain, let's say, difference between the Yanagi model and the impact accounting. Impact accounting per se is showing companies' social impact, environmental, employment, product impact, in addition to the financial, EBITDA. Then it's going to show the social impact in absolute dollar amount with numbers, so that the people could understand what is the value or impact of the employment, or we'll see, and what is the impact of the certain product, how much we can see the dollar amount. For example, at Eisai, we calculated Eisai Japan's employment impact is roughly 27 billion yen, or Eisai's employees' value or impact is 27 billion yen in accordance with IFBA or HBS methodology. And also, Eisai is offering, neglected tropical disease drug for free of charge. Then what is the value or social impact of this drug donation from 2014 to 18? It's kind of counted as a 7 trillion yen for lifetime, and also 160 billion yen per annum. So people could understand what is the value or impact of employment or product per se to the society. That's great. So that decision maker make informed decision, like corporate managers or employees or outside shareholders. That's great. On the flip side, it doesn't directly show the relationship with corporate value or share price. And to fill in the gap, Yanagi model is using multiple regression model, picking up impact KPI or ESG KPI, and having a positive or negative correlation coefficient with actual share price to book value ratio, so that people would understand the impact of the impact or ESG with corporate value. For example, at Eisai, if you invest 10% more in human capital, your corporate value will be enhanced more than 13% in 5 years belatedly with, a delayed penetration effect. So combining both, we can tell the people, value of the impact, social impact in absolute dollar amount via impact accounting. And also we can tell you the, correlation with corporate value, share price with, correlation efficient, so that especially global investor will make a, a valuation or a portfolio judgment. With that, we can convince more stakeholders with numbers. Back to the basic of the impact accounting, many opinion leaders like Eric Rice, ex-BlackRock Impact Portfolio Chief, or Ronald Cohen, father of the impact investment, say there's 3 factors. Without measurement, you cannot manage the company. But 3 preconditions is material, additional, measurable. Your impact is material, your impact is additional, unique to you besides the peers, and also your impact could be measurable. You can calculate that in actual numbers besides ambiguous, beautiful statement. So numbers has a positive power to convince people. With that, Yanagi model, impact accounting, both supplementing each other, could raise social impact or ESG with actual corporate value. David said at my class at the Waseda University, it's a kind of paradigm shift of the definition of the corporate value. Corporate value used to be relying upon just financial statement, but nowadays, incorporating the Yanagi model and impact, it has the intrinsic value, which has financial value and also non-financial social impact or value of ESG. I think we are facing a very important period of the transition, and the impact accounting and the Yanagi model is some tools to shift from traditional value to new value under such paradigm shift era. Thank you.
Thank you. Oh, Sonja, please.
Yeah, thank you, David. At this stage, I'd like to circle back to your introductory statement of saying, well, what's the difficulty with disclosure, and why wouldn't one disclose more? So at this point, I'd like to establish with what Rio said, that why should one care about impact? It's very simple. It sustains and supports top-line growth, it sustains and supports bottom-line growth, and it articulates value to the capital market. And I think that's the heart of the matter. And inevitably, if you do these things, these in a truthful representation of your business activities, they would also in one way or form flow into an annual report. But the annual report, the disclosure, is not the means in and by itself. What's relevant is that strategic approach to data, that strategic approach on how you want to tackle your business system as part of a future evolution in view of the changing ecosystem of businesses that we all find ourselves in.
Sonja, thank you, because I think you summarized very nicely what I was trying to come up with some words in my head around. How do we really think about the use case at the end of the day for this impact information? Yanagi-san very nicely explained these two different concepts of impact. On one side, what the Yanagi model is trying to accomplish, which is trying to understand this connection between the impacts that a organization is having and how society and the environment then affects the business, positively or negatively, in this case looking at market prices. That's one direction, while impact accounting kind of looks at that other direction. How, in quantitative terms, is the business's operations affecting society and the environment? And so when we think about this idea of impact transparency, at least kind of I almost like to put these two ideas together almost as two sides of the same coin. If we want to have a transparent understanding of our impacts, We want to understand in verifiable, quantifiable, what means, how is the organization impacting society and environment. But also, at the end of the day, this is a business. We want to understand what the use case is and how and what those pathways, what mechanisms exist for society and environment to impact the business, both now, but also in the future. And we've heard a little bit about what those pathways could look like. Ryo, you and I have spent quite a bit of time doing impact accounting work, measuring, and then you have taken this and used it. You talked a little bit about some of the cases, but can you delve into why was it valuable for you? What did impact information allow you to accomplish that previously was a challenge?
Yeah, thank you, David. Actually, impact accounting and the Yanagi model made a huge difference in my life and also at the SI. With that numbers to calculate social impact or ESG, we can use that for the high-level decision-making process. How are you going to allocate the capital into the human resources or R&D, diversity and inclusion? Whatever. You need evidence to guide it. Then with the Yanagi model, I proved at the SI positive correlation coefficient between human capital and PBR, R&D and PBR, female promotion and PBR, and the child care leave with PBR, and the recruiting handicapped people and PBR. Then with numbers and correlation, we can allocate capital. Top management, can utilize that with the number. And also female promotion ratio, we set the target 30% at the 2030 with the scientific numbers with multiple regression model and the impact accounting. So decision-making power is huge if it's based upon actual numbers, scientific evidence, rather than ambiguous, discussions at the boardroom. That's one thing. Another thing is, of course, stakeholder engagement. Stakeholder engagement, mainly targeted at the outside shareholders. Shareholders are really, if we seek long-term investors, they are very intelligent people with a lot of PhD guys. We got to convince them with numbers, thesis, evidence. Then Yanagi model and impact accounting made a huge difference. For example, as I was included in the very limited selective portfolio of the impact investing by the global investors, including BlackRock, based upon the Yanagi model and impact accounting. At that time, when I was a CFO, head of the impact investing at the BlackRock was Eric Rice, who resigned already, but he said, BlackRock is not a charity organization, although we invest in the impact portfolio. We need evidence for value creation. We need the numbers. Then Eric, touted the merit of impact accounting. Then I showed the Yanagi model, positive correlation between impact or ESG and PBR. And also, like I said, I showed the impact accounting on the ASI's drug donation. We wrote a thesis together with David Freiberg in line with Harvard Business School methodologies. And Eric highly appreciated the impact accounting of drug donation. 7 trillion yen of the impact for lifetime, 160 billion yen per annum impact on our impact, accounting-wise. Then he cited one of the main reasons, to pick up ESA into his impact portfolio was impact accounting and the Yanagi model. So this is just an example. And besides BlackRock, I have the confidential information with a lot of global impact fund or ESG fund. They overweighted us because of the numbers, impact accounting, and Yanagi model. So powerful the tools are, amazing. It's going to make a huge difference. And according to my global investor survey, vast majority of global investors say ESG or impact for ESG or impact, or disclosure for disclosure is nothing. We need a disclosure for value creation. We need evidence and numbers. So in order to convince outside stakeholders, especially shareholders, we need the numbers. On top of it, more importantly, in my view, employment engagement, that's gonna make a huge difference. I was engaged with the labor union quarterly. At the quarter financial disclosure meeting with labor union, as a CFO at that time, I got to explain P&L, balance sheet, cash flow, of course, all the financial statement. Normal company finished it, period. But I extended the time, 1 more hours, then explained Yanagi model and impact accounting. Then I showed, as a Japan people, your employment impact is 27 billion yen per year. And your investment in you, employees, will enhance PBR more than 13% in 5 years belatedly with 95% of the probability of success academically with multiple regression model. Head of the labor union, Sayaka Kobayashi, female leader, said she was very impressed with numbers, evidence. CFO himself proved value creation of SI employees. She said she's gonna deliver the message to all the labor union people. And they say they are even more motivated to create a value. So win-lose management labor union relationship becomes win-win relationship between management and labor union. So numbers, evidence is so powerful the tool to convincing the people and made a huge difference. So impact accounting and the Yanagi model or whatever other quantifiable methodology is gonna make a huge contribution with transparency and also comparing evidence. I think that's important for, especially for Japanese companies. Most often the case, ambiguous, beautiful statement above our heads, and that they are talking everything but talking about nothing. That kind of the boardroom discussion is always seen in Japan. But we need a clear-cut evidence, science, numbers. That is a transparency, one step forward based upon purpose and materiality. Thank you.
Thank you, Ryo. I love hearing stories about the use case. How do we actually use impact data? Because when we think about, okay, again, going back to this idea of what is impact transparency, we have data transparency around data collection, transparency around analysis. How do we actually get the however many trillion yen of positive impact that ASI is producing? But then there's transparency around how is that information being used within the business to make decisions. And one of the things that I see in my work is that there's so much focus on data collection, and it's very, very important. But how we want to use the data informs how we collect the data and how we analyze it. And so it's really important to think about this whole picture. And Sonja, I want to hear kind of your thoughts on this, because you've written a whole book on the case for impact, which is a great book. Would highly recommend it to everyone. Just a little plug there. But same question for you, Sonja. Really, what is really the use case of impact, and how have you seen this be successful in changing how organizations operate?
Thank you, David. I guess the key element in the case for impact is the topic of theme alignment that is underlying much of what Ryo said in terms of what are internal or external stakeholders expecting, and how can we create a common language of understanding and start to see the world based on the same facts. And this is at play when it comes to labor unions, where it's more an external decision, but also for topics like innovation. Some innovations are so advanced that you may lack initially the customers to appreciate the innovation or any supporting environment in helping you get that innovation off the ground. So that notion of theme alignment, introducing an innovation, really goes a long way. And while my full-time employment is with Novartis, another pharmaceutical company. There are examples where to actually have a layperson's explanation of what a medicine does really helped establish on why that's needed, why it's needed now, in which geography, and how to actually go about it. But this is the same thing as well for other types of innovations that may not, and that goes a long way. I was actually surprised in my research for the book, I was surprised to stumble across that example of the city of Stockholm making the case for impact for introducing electric vehicles in their public transportation, which I would have thought is self-evident, but it's not. It's taxpayers' money, and they needed to justify that that's well spent, and they did that by providing the same impact transparency that Ryo talked about. So theme alignment as the basis for market preparation, and then differentiation in the market as well, which is pretty much what SK Group in South Korea are specifying, that they say that their impact transparency helps them being recognized in the market. Then of course the notion of employee retention in being seen as an impactful company and really making a difference instead of just talking anecdotally about it, but having a consistent evidence over years and driving things and learning from where things are not yet perfect, because who can claim to be perfect ever, right? And then, of course, moving from there also in the topics of value protection. So value creation is one thing that is often underexplored. Value protection, the macroeconomic externalities are much better understood. And with an impact assessment, these externalities are very well described and very well quantified, so that one knows what roundabout a P&L impact would be for a company should those come to bear. And often at that point in time, it's classical enterprise risk management that can take over. But to screen the horizon, having a monitoring system to understand where exposures could emerge from, which geographies, which sectors that you do directly business with or indirectly, is a type of knowledge that just helps one being one step closer. And all of that, to just say that again, translates to theme alignment on helping stakeholders to sort of buy in or have a basis to dispute if they don't agree with what the leadership of the company does. So these foundations for the case for impact are truly substantial. It can only repeat relevant for top line, for the bottom line, and for the valuation of the company.
Thank you, Sonja. I want to open this up to the audience right now and spend a few minutes taking questions if there are any out there. It's no fun just hearing us. I see, yes, orange shirt.
Thank you very much. I've been in the food industry here in Japan for over 20 years, and one of the things that I found with the companies is they don't want to disclose how much they're doing with SDGs, perhaps in reducing food waste in that area. And the reason they'll say that is because they don't want their competitors to know how much they're wasting. But I think also a bigger one is they don't want the general public to know. So I want you to comment about that, because you're promoting transparency here, and I don't see that. I do see that there is definitely a form over substance here in Japan, but I want to have you comment on that aspect itself, because I could see it also related to employee turnover. The churn rate of a company, companies wouldn't want to release that information out to the public. So how do you square that between what you're saying here is that companies are trying to be transparent, and yet the reality is that companies don't see that in their interest to publish that information?
In a direct, quick response, and Ryo, do chime in later. Disclosure is not a means in and by itself, so I would like the audience to understand that this is about the value of measuring and valuing impacts as an assessment tool and insights internally first. Whether or not one discloses things and creates transparency very much hinges on which stakeholders one wants to engage with. And Rio had these examples of the union, of the shareholders, employees that needed to hear that story. But by no means would I be advocating for a blind transparency on just about anything. I mean, of course, you don't want to give away your crown jewels in the disclosures, and clearly things are partially competitively relevant. So so that is the point. So if there was a more comprehensive need for transparency as is for financial statements, that's then a different story. But in terms of voluntary disclosures, one is well advised to really go with how and what do I want the audience of my reports to know? How do I make sure I comply, and what does fit into the overall brand story? But all of these things should be backed up by strategic thinking about how do I translate my strategy into adequate metrics? How do I translate my purpose into adequate metrics? And how do I future-proof my company with the help of adequate metrics? And my conviction is that you need for that metrics of impact that are different to metrics to input and output. Please, Ryo.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I think most of the Japanese companies are doing great, but without the numbers or sufficient disclosure or engagement, still overlooked and undervalued in most cases. Then rather than once again, equivocal discussions, we need a concrete evidence and case study. In that sense, Sonya's Case for Impact is a great textbook for Japanese companies to learn the best practices. And for your reference, just this morning in the New York Times, IFBI disclosed Eisai's case study of the employment impact accounting and also drug donations accounting, and in a detailed description and the numbers, so that you can take a look at that for your reference. Then you are in a food industry on a long term, right? And the food industry in Japan is doing the right things in most cases, I believe, like waste management, losses management, and also, providing, high quality, environmentally friendly goods, or offering sometimes, good food to the starving nations in Africa or developing nations. And these endeavors, yes, it should be appreciated, but couldn't be factored into the valuation enough without the numbers. Then to cope with that situation in the food industry, for example, Nissin Foods Holdings, under the leadership of the Chief Strategic Officer, Mr. Yokoyama, adopted the Yanagi model and impact accounting with a relatively good disclosure, well received by the capital market and also the stakeholders. And I think Japanese food industry deserve more, doing the right things with a conscious mind, and the Case for Impact is going to make a difference. So probably you can refer to the Nissin Foods case for the Yanagi model and the impact accounting disclosures and the engagement examples. That's my comment to supplement Sonya's statement. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. I think we have time for one more question. I saw right in the middle there. Oh, perfect. You already have a mic, so you win.
Yeah, sorry, I already got the mic here. 10 years ago, I was getting my MBA at University of Washington. I did a study abroad at Waseda University. And I recall at the time my finance professor giving us a spirited defense of, at the time there was the debate between stakeholder capitalism versus shareholder. And I recall the finance professor giving a very spirited defense of share price-based management, right? Like everything, all the information is going to be encapsulated in the share price. And I was very partial to that argument at the time, and I feel like the Yanagi model, for example, is kind of a reflection of this development of thought, where in the end, capital markets only work when fiduciaries work in the interest of their shareholders. And, Henry Ford 100 years ago didn't need consultants and MBAs to tell him that he had to pay his workers enough to afford their cars, right? So I feel like it's kind of full circle, right? Where, scientific management revolution of the 70s and 80s focused on financial statements because that's all they had. And they strip mined, companies for value, and they forgot about all the things that business leaders used to know intuitively. And ESG is trying to bring that back in, and maybe in a quantitative manner now. But the old adage, right? As soon as you make a metric a target, it ceases to provide information. So really, and that's what I worry about. Do either of you have any thoughts or maybe your own concerns about the danger of continuing to try and measure real impact with metrics and maybe businesses lose sight of the reality of the impact they have on the world by just kind of living in this bubble of, oh, my metrics say I'm doing what I'm supposed to do, so I can make my investors and stakeholders happy. But again, substance over form, right? The more we add metrics to the equation, the more I think people tend to lose track of the substance of their impact. And I wonder if either of you have any concerns or worries about whether your work might be contributing to that. Thank you.
Thank you. Just very quickly, my entrepreneur friends say, well, that impact stuff you're doing, it just makes good business sense. So what is special to it? And I think this echoes very much your sentiment on, Henry Ford, and at that time that was sort of all clear and understood that without paying fair enough wages, without catering for your suppliers, you just don't have a business. With nanosecond trading and certain financial instruments, that reality got a few levers, a few areas removed from businesses, and not always are these feedback cycles so clear, which is why you can't do with random ESG selection of metrics, but you need to have clarity on where you make a difference to your stakeholders. And it's my conviction that if you translate a statement of purpose or a strategy statement into impact metrics that express what makes a difference to those stakeholders, then you have that simplicity again, you have that clarity again that helps you steer in whatever the turbulences are.
We are out of time, so I'm gonna steal 30 seconds because I want to hear closing remarks from both Yanagi-san and Sonja really quickly, and just kind of last comments that the audience should take away.
Last comment.
Last comment.
All right. Partially to answer that question, I think here Yanagi model impact accounting long-termism is the key. Avoid short-termism so that we can have win-win situation to incorporate shareholder capitalism and stakeholder capitalism. But Japan is undervalued, given the latent potential of the impact or ESG value. I think we can double the market cap. We can double the corporate value in the long run. But the key to success is measurement, impact accounting or the Yanagi model. With ESG and impact, we can change Japan. Let's change the world together. Thank you. Thank you very much today.
Sonja, last comments?
Well, I would clearly love to see Japan leading the way to impact measurement and impact accounting. So looking forward to seeing that coming to bear. For everyone and the audience, the part of the audience coming from elsewhere, clearly impact measurement and accounting does make good business sense. So even if you're not in Japan, go for it. It's worth it.
Great. Thank you both so much for your time and your comments. Really interesting discussion, and thank you all so much for attending. I know there's probably many, many more questions. Ryo and Sonja will be around to answer them later. But again, thank you all so much. Back to you.
Thank you very much. Everybody, please give a round of applause.
Thank you.
And before they leave, we would like to have a photo session. では帰る前にね、お写真タイムをさせていただきたいと思います。If you have cameras, medias, Thank you very much for a great, 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 great session. I learned a lot. Being here today is a great study day for one day. It seems like I'm back in school. ね、ありがとうございました。もう一度皆さん大きな拍手をお送りください。ありがとうございました。Thank you very much.